Hello, and welcome to this special pro-life interview. I'm Amanda Markeski, and I'm delighted to be welcoming our special guest, Jason Jones, the president and founder of Movie to Movement, and a longtime defender of life. Welcome, Jason.
Aloha.
I'm so happy to have you here. So you're a film producer, and you have a production company, Movie to Movement. Can you tell us a little bit about that and, you know, all the different movies you've made? Some may be familiar to our viewers.
Yeah, sure. Movie to Movement's a program of our nonprofit, the Human Rights Education and Relief Organization. And the mission of our organization, it's very simple. I say we do one thing two ways. Our mission is to protect the vulnerable from violence, and we do this by telling the truth about the human person. And what I mean by that is that every human being that you see is the most beautiful created thing in the cosmos. Every human being you look at has this incomparable dignity, beauty, and worth. And really, there's no better way to communicate that, I think, today than the motion picture, which brings together the best of all art forms. And we also want to inspire solidarity with the vulnerable. We want those that are not in positions of vulnerability to share the burdens of the vulnerable. And to be vulnerable, I always like to remind people, isn't to be weak. You can throw an Olympic swimmer into the middle of the ocean, and he's vulnerable. And I can't swim very well, but if I have a boat, I can row up beside him and put him in the boat. So we want to inspire people to live in solidarity with the vulnerable, and we want to tell the truth about the beauty of the human person. And so Hero, about 12 years ago, we started Movie to Movement to produce movies and then to partner with other production companies to promote their movies, to do those two things, those two simple things.
Wonderful. So you grew up in Chicago on the South Side, right?
I did.
Okay. Now, before we get to all of your other wonderful credentials, can you tell us a little bit about growing up? What kind of a kid were you?
We weren't Christians. I didn't come from a family with any faith tradition. My childhood was, it's not something I would want for my children, you know, but I am grateful for it personally because I think it gave me the gift of empathy, and I think empathy is a beautiful gift.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, the one thing about growing up that I think prepared me for my apostolate was, I remember as a very young boy, as far back as I can remember, I think I'm a big daydreamer. I don't know if everyone daydreams, but I daydream a lot. And as a child, my daydreams would always be about what kind of family I would have. And I always daydreamed about having a peaceful home, a safe home, a joyful home with lots of children. And so it's something that I experienced later on that we might talk about. I sort of failed out of the gate to do that. And so sort of like a whole childhood of daydreaming about being this great man, this loving man, this protective man. And then when I failed, those two things together sort of birthed my apostolate, sort of this passion to protect children, especially from violence.
So you talk about failing. What makes you use those words?
Well, when I was 16, actually, 2 days before my 17th birthday, I was almost 17, my high school girlfriend who went to Montecito Academy rode her bike 5 miles from her house to my house and woke me up on a Saturday morning. And she woke me up with the words, "I'm pregnant." So the two of us spent that morning trying to figure out what we were going to do. And I had a friend who just joined the Army. He went right from high school to basic training. And so he told me there was this program where you could do that. So I went down to the recruiters and signed up for that program. And that was the plan, that I would join the Army and she would hide the pregnancy till after basic training. And then we would tell her parents together. But while I was in basic training, just a couple of weeks before I was to come home, I get a call on a Sunday morning, a few weeks before I was coming home. And her father found out she was pregnant, beat her up, and took her to Chicago Masonic Hospital where she had a forced third trimester abortion. And when she called me, it was as if her soul was crying. I can't even explain it. Yeah. And she just kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And I didn't know really abortion was a thing. As strange as that, not only that it was legal, it was just the strangest thing to hear that not only was my child destroyed, but I was crying to my captain. You know, my drill sergeant actually hung up the phone on my high school girlfriend because I wasn't supposed to be on the phone. And I hit him, and another drill sergeant grabbed me and threw me into my captain's office. And I just was yelling, actually, and crying, "Call the police." I was yelling, "Call the FBI." I don't know what I was thinking, but I was just pleased. My girlfriend's father killed my baby. And my captain, this big Army Ranger, began to cry, just looking at me crying. Yeah. And when I explained to him what happened, he said, why would I call the police private? Don't you know abortion is legal? And I didn't. And I didn't understand that it was really even a thing. And I wish the whole world could see abortion the way that this uneducated, irreligious, high school dropout saw abortion. And the way I still do is just unthinkable, unimaginable evil. And this wasn't formed by church. I'd never been to church a day in my life. It wasn't formed by politics. It was just, if you weren't propagandized, if you were to look at abortion through just no lens, but truthfully, you would see that how startling it is that the most vulnerable members of the human family are left without legal protection from violence. And that, why would they even need protection? It's unimaginable that you would even have to have laws to protect a child from abortion, because you would think it's an unthinkable thing.
Yes.
But unfortunately, it's thinkable, and it's legal, and it's real.
It is. And I'm so sorry you experienced that. It sounds just gut-wrenching. But there you are. So what, you're 16, 17 years old.
17, yeah.
And this, you dropped out of high school and you're a teenager and now you're experiencing this. How did you get from there to where you are now?
Well, from there, from Fort Benning, Georgia, I ended up going to Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. I was there for about a month, and we did our first deployment in something called Cobra Gold, and it was to Thailand. So just maybe 60 days later from this experience in basic training, I found myself in the most remote parts of Thailand. And I remember just seeing real poverty. And I remember it was at that experience in Cobra Gold where we were in a very remote mountainous region, and I saw a father with a very sick child, and I'd asked our interpreter what was going on, and he said, "This boy's probably dying of malaria." And I remember looking at this father and seeing in his eyes exactly what I felt. And I thought, I just want to spend the rest of my life trying to make myself as useful as possible to vulnerable people. That was sort of how I thought of it. And so I mapped out a plan, actually, how would I make myself increasingly more useful to vulnerable people? Because I didn't want anyone to feel like how I felt at Fort Benning, Georgia. I daydreamed my whole life about being this great man, that children would be happy and healthy and protected, and I failed. And I said, okay, sort of almost because I was an atheist, I would say I had a feeling of vengeance, that my vengeance against the universe would be that I'm going to get in between the violent and the vulnerable every chance I get. The other thoughts I had while I was there in Fort Benning, Georgia, is coming from a broken home. My father in my childhood, went from being working class all the way up to being solidly middle class. My mother floundered, and struggled. But people would say maybe I had a disadvantaged childhood. But I realized as a young soldier on deployment that I'm the most privileged human being on earth. Like, I'm an American, I have access to education and everything. And so I'll never be helpless again, and I'll work very hard. And so when I got out, I started taking college classes in the Army. I'd actually laminate books. The first two books I laminated was Plato's The Republic and Machiavelli's The Prince. And I'd put them in my rucksack, and then from there I just became a bibliomaniac. I was last in my class in high school before I dropped out of over 500 students.
Wow.
I went from being that guy to being in the jungles of Thailand with a red flashlight, under my poncho, reading Plato's Republic at 2 in the morning when I could be sleeping. And it was all just driven. I always thought that in books was the answer to ending abortion, and books was the answer to protecting the vulnerable. And so I knew I had to go to school, to classes in the Army, then got out of the Army after my tour was done and went to the University of Hawaii. And from there, I got into activism and politics and media.
Okay, that's really interesting, because I think you mentioned that at this point you were still an atheist, right?
Yeah, I was an atheist for the first 14 years in the pro-life movement. And not just any kind of atheist, like militant.
Yeah.
I better look to Christian revelation, and I had a lot of bigotry to Christianity. I better look to revealed religion as maybe they're right. And so with clear eyes, I started in Genesis and just started reading, and it was in Isaiah 53, where I was sort of taken aback. Like, wait, what is Jesus Christ doing in the Jewish scriptures in the Old Testament? And I really wanted to rush ahead to the New Testament, but I kept plodding along. And then when you meet Christ, when you meet Jesus in the New Testament, and you take away all the preconceived notions of what media has put in your mind, what people have told you about Jesus. But you read Jesus in Scripture, there's nothing more beautiful you can even dream of. And here I was, this hardcore atheist. I'd say that's when I became a Christian. And then through that, I was going to an evangelical church, sort of the most aggressively outspoken pro-life church in my state. I thought that has to be the church. I knew there had to be one denomination that was right, but I started reading the church fathers. I just wanted to keep reading. I'm a bibliomaniac. And when I discovered that there were other first and second and third century Christian writings, I couldn't resist. And I had this horrible epiphany, this revelation, like, oh no, the Catholics are right. I don't want to be Catholic. And so it took me 2 years, 3 years from that point before I was eventually received into the Catholic Church.
Wow. That's amazing what God can do, huh? Just opening your eyes and leading you to Jesus Christ.
How I feel is it's a mystery that it was through this abortion, this destruction of the child, that led to me assenting to the truth of God. And to me, it's a puzzle to me.
That's really powerful. Thank you. Well, just shifting gears for a minute here, let's begin to talk about your work in film. First of all, how did you get involved in the business?
It was in my plan. I wrote when I was in my barracks, I wrote a 40-year plan to end abortion. And in the plan, I put, movies was a part of the plan.
Wow.
But I meant documentaries. So in 2000, I made a documentary. But I really fell into the film business. So I started going door to door when I was a soldier in my off days, talking to people about abortion. Didn't even know there was a pro-life movement, got involved with pro-life groups. And then I realized when I got out of the Army, if I run for leadership positions in organizations, I can use those organizations' platforms to communicate, do radio interviews, do press releases. So I ran for chairman of the College Republicans and won, and ran for chairman of the Young Republicans and won. So I was doing talk radio. I started doing cable news, like being on Fox and CNN, and I was even on Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher. Made a documentary. The documentary won some awards. It was on youth culture called The Gates of Hell, and I still wasn't Catholic. And then when I was in Mexico City working on a political project, I met Eduardo Verástegui, the producer and star of Bella. And so although to me, making narrative feature films was unthinkable. To me, Hollywood was a cloud, it was a castle in the clouds. I could make documentaries and things like this, but a narrative feature film, unimaginable. To make a film that would win the Toronto International Film Festival, or to be a part of a film that won the NAACP Image Award, or with the Hollywood Film Festival, all these film festivals we won, couldn't have even dreamed it. But this is where I say that when you have a noble ambition to serve the vulnerable especially, God gives you the grace you need to achieve those goals beyond your imagination. It's really unbelievable to me. And because when I was an atheist, I said a prayer at one point. I was so frustrated at our lack of progress. I said, God, if you exist, and I don't believe you're real, but if you want me to acknowledge your existence, you only need to give me 3 things. You need to give me rich people, famous people, and powerful people to fight abortion.
That's it, yeah.
And that's all. That's all I need. And when I was invited by the United Nations to show our little film Crescendo, that was funded in part by one of the wealthiest men in the world and produced with Patty Millett, the mother of Justin Bieber, and I see our film before the ambassadors at the United Nations, I really could hear God say, what do you want now, smart guy? And I felt as hopeless then, I thought, as I did when I made that prayer. And then when I realized I didn't need God to get his will right, we need to correspond our life to God's will. And he gives us all the grace we need to do that. I always pray with my children every night that God gives us a super abundant grace so that we all die in a state of grace. And then our posterity all have this. I have so little faith in myself that I need super abundant grace. I need it all. And I feel like when it comes to living in solidarity with the vulnerable, God gives you that super abundant grace.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Now, what is it about film that makes it such a great tool for promoting pro-life views?
It's the best question. So Roger Ebert, by the way, I think he was an atheist.
Okay.
He's a beautiful human being, Chicago boy, and passed away a couple of years ago, great movie critic. He called motion pictures empathy-generating machines.
Yes.
And, that's what I love about movies. They inspire in all of us empathy. And so movies like Juno, I'll talk about a movie I didn't have anything to do with. And I don't know the politics of Diablo Cody, another Chicago girl who wrote it. But what I know is that it's such a beautiful portrayal of what young people who find themselves in a crisis pregnancy go through. I have to imagine she went through it too. And because she doesn't have a child that would be of that age, I have to imagine which way that choice went in her life. But what she does through her film Young Adult as well, and in her film Juno, is she helps us feel what that young girl would feel. And Or Waitress, another film, helps us feel what this woman would feel. And it's not clean cut. You have a woman in Waitress who's pregnant by a man who is sort of abusive and who she doesn't love. And she thinks she's not happy about having a kid. And she feels guilty about not being happy about having a kid. And yet she has her kid. And then the resolution is so beautiful. If you've seen Waitress, it's one of the most beautiful scenes in history when she has her baby who she thinks she doesn't want placed in her arms. And she goes, "Oh my God." Do you remember that scene? Or just in theaters recently, this movie on Freddie Mercury, Bohemian Rhapsody. It helps you it breaks your heart to see a man who never really had exposure to the gospel of Jesus Christ, who had a brutal childhood, thrust into this world, and how sad and lonely he was. And you feel that. You feel that. And that's the power of film.
Yeah, you're spot on. I would love to ask you this next question about the film Bella. I know it's had a huge impact on people all over the globe, and I think there's something special that you might be able to tell us about that.
A lot of things special, but
Yeah.
I'll tell you, the thing that's most special to me is, I'll share with you two stories. Our goal was to know the name of one baby who was born within 10 years of our theatrical release. We wanted to know the name of one baby who was born because of our film. Sort of a modest goal. 10 years, I don't even know. Alejandro Monteverdi said that was his goal within 10 years. And well, of course, before we were even in theaters, before we even had a distribution deal, because of screenings, people had canceled abortions in the entertainment industry who are looking to help us distribute the film.
Crazy.
It was unbelievable.
That's amazing.
Well, we've received over 1,000 letters, emails, and messages. But because of social media, and because I'm kind of the outspoken pro-life guy of the gang, I get all of these pictures sent to me and tags and messages. And there's one young woman who chose life because she saw Bella, ended up being pregnant with twins, was literally about to die in childbirth. And one of the clients that helped her through her pregnancy, one of the pregnancy center volunteers, this was in Kentucky, called me. And I happened to be on the, say, "Will you please pray for this young woman?" And we happened to be on the set of Crescendo on Universal Studios in the birthing scene.
Oh my goodness.
And so we stopped and production, and we all got around and we prayed. And we said, "But can you put the phone with her? We want to be with her." And the phone was on speaker with her, and Eduardo was praying for her. We were all praying for her. And her heart rate and everything normalized right at that point. And we've remained friends ever since. She has these two beautiful daughters. They're 9 years old. And to me, we've remained very close. And another story, which was just amazing, was 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, I was emceeing the Students for Life of America National Convention. And I'm on stage, we're promoting a film called Where Hope Grows, and the actor, the star, has Down syndrome, and I had to introduce him and bring him on stage. And my assistant says, "There's a young woman here, she needs to see you now. She's like 16 years old, and I think it's very important you see her. She's pregnant, she's demanding to see you." I'm like, this is weird, I'm emceeing an event, like I can't step off stage. She has to leave in 10 minutes. She took the bus all the way from Philadelphia to meet you.
Gosh.
And she has to go back to catch the bus to go back. Now we're in Maryland. And I said, this is too strange. So I sneak off stage, I pass the mic off to somebody, and there I am at the Students for Life convention. There's this young 16-year-old girl. She says, "Hi, Mr. Jones. I needed to find you. A couple of months ago, I found out I was pregnant, and my Spanish teacher showed us Bella in class. And I was scheduled to have an abortion the next day, but we saw Bella in Spanish class because of the Latino theme.
Wow.
I canceled my abortion. I Googled you guys. I found out your commitment and your passion for, all these Bella babies. But a young woman taking the bus to the train to the bus to come tell you she's kept her baby because your movie, 8 years after it was in theaters, that pushes me.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that, really. So earlier, you said you wanted to have a big family, you wanted to have a peaceful home, and you were so excited to be a father. And I know that you are a husband and father now, and of a lot of children. How many children do you have?
I don't know if it's a lot. We're told it's a lot.
More than the
today.
average American family.
Today it's a lot. But I have 7 children.
7 children.
I had 2 as a teenager. And so it was me and my 2 kids against the world.
Yeah.
Until I got married at 35, became Catholic at 30. I had my son at 18 and my daughter at 19. And that was a great blessing and privilege, And I'm a grandfather. I have 2 grandchildren.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Your family is very supportive of you then, and your mission and your movie to movement project.
Well, they all have their own things, their own commitments. My 26-year-old daughter is really passionate about Hawaii, her culture and island culture, and she has her own little moo-moo business, and she's very, very engaged in the pro-life movement. She was on Comedy Central and debated Tosh on abortion.
Oh my gosh!
And she's been a part of some very big national initiatives, but her passion is the homeless. So she is the darling of the homeless. When we lived in LA, and she was just 18 years old, she'd get up every morning at 5:30, take the bus to the barrio to Skid Row, and she would be there till 2:30 every day from sunrise till about 2:30 before she had to go to college courses, and caring for the homeless, working with the homeless, working with those with mental problems and drug problems. And at one time, drove my wife crazy that she would do that. She'd say, "It's dangerous." I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's dangerous to do beautiful things. And I would rather my daughter be doing these dangerous things than doing other kinds of dangerous things. And I'm gonna let her do it."
Yeah, that's great. So as a husband and father, and you mentioned having a daughter, and you bring a man's perspective to an issue that in many ways in this culture is a woman's issue. Everyone talks about how it's my body, my choice. It's not a man's place to say. But how does a man's perspective help when you're promoting this culture of life?
There are issues that impact women more directly, and abortion is one of those issues. But if you're a woman and you're pregnant, there's a man in the picture.
Right.
Right? And so it's a man's issue too. And I think men need to speak up for life, especially if you're post-abortive, especially if you coerced or threatened or neglected a woman, and so she made this choice. You have an obligation to speak up. And I don't care. They can say whatever they want. I love it. I tell them, I don't care what you say. Why? Because I'm a man. I'm a man. I don't care. So that they can tell me it's not a man's issue. And now with this gender ideology confusing everybody, it's so silly. I think the way that we respond is by just being men, acting like men. Be a man. For generations, forever, into Latin, we can go back to the Latin expressions about act like a man. We all know what that means. And men and women, but men in their way, defend the vulnerable from violence. That's the job of a man. By the way, not just my child. Yeah, it's not just my responsibility for me to protect my children from violence.
Right.
It's to protect other children from violence. And that human being in the womb as a child deserves legal protection. And I don't care what the world says. The world's constantly wrong. They were wrong on segregation. They were wrong on slavery. They were wrong on so many things. And the spirit of our age is wrong on the child in the womb.
That's so great. Well, Jason, it's been such a pleasure and truly an honor to speak with you and to hear your message. And on behalf of Shalom World TV, we want to thank you for being here and for sharing your pro-life message with us and with the world and with the viewers all over the world. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Jesus said, "Go out to the whole world and announce the good news." And that's what Shalom is doing. It's bringing the good news of the Holy Spirit in action, renewing the face of the earth so that all people may know how good is the Lord, how beautiful is the work of salvation. Thank you, Shalom, for all you do to reach out, to lead the faith forward. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.